Hi fellow Django developers, Hezekiah here from alwaysdjango.com, where we discuss interesting Django topics that helps you grow, improve as a Django developer. If that sounds interesting, like, subscribe, share this video with anyone if you find this video important. Let's get into it. So before we continue, guys, I want to apologize for the late uploading. I'm very sorry. It's not like really my fault. I'm back to school actually in my final years, so like the schedule is really tight, so I apologize. I hope you bear with me, and I promise to always still find space to do what we have to do here, right? So let's continue. So today we are going to discuss how to use GitHub with Django, right? I was discussing with a subscriber here on our channel, and like I found out that he didn't really understand how to use GitHub, so I decided to make a, should I call it, crash course on how you can easily use GitHub in our Django applications, push GitHub in our Django application, push GitHub, use GitHub to manage our Django applications, right? So first of all, what is GitHub? GitHub is simply a version controller, right? So by version controller is simply a space, is simply somewhere, it's like a social network, right? For a social network in a way for programmers. You can push your codes there, you can pull them back, you can outsource and share your codes share your repositories with different programmers, right? So why I decided to make this video is because in the couple of videos following our Django absolute beginner tutorials, we'll be making a video on how to deploy Django to Heroku, right? So I will be using GitHub for that. So I thought it right to discuss using GitHub to manage our Django application, right? So here we have a very simple Django application already. This Django application is a Django application we developed during our Django absolute beginner playlist, right? This application right here, let me zoom in. This application right here, we worked on it during our Django absolute beginner playlist. This is the home, this is the login, this is the registration, right? So we're going to use GitHub to manage we're going to use GitHub to control this project, to push and pull this project, right here I have a Django application. If you don't know how to create a Django application, I'll leave a link to it in the description. I'll also leave a link to the Django absolute beginner tutorial in the description so that you can go and look at it, right? So first things first, how do you get started with GitHub, right? So first thing is to download GitHub, right? So you go to your browser, press search for download GitHub, right? So I'll leave a link to this page right here where you can download GitHub from. This desktop.github.com, right? You can come here. I'm obviously using Windows, right? That's why it's saying I should download for Windows. If you are maybe using for Mac, if you want to download for Mac, download for Linux, etc., the download button will be here. So I'll leave a link to this web page right here so that I can easily download it, right? So if you press download right here, if you check here at the bottom, my download process starts, right? My download process starts here. So, but I'll not continue it because I already downloaded GitHub and I already have it installed in my system. But for you, you should download it. It will install, then it will download, then you simply click on it, then click a couple of yes, then agree to the terms and conditions, and that will be it, right? So after downloading this and installing it successfully on your device, on your machine, you have ability to use the GitHub CLI commands, right? So you'll be able to use Git, right? You'll be able to go to your command line and maybe press GitHub, right? GitHub will be a command for you in your command line, right? So let me zoom in. So so right now you have a project, right? You already have a project. Let's say we have a project right here. I'll leave a link to this project in the description so that you can go and look at it, right? So to make to make there's something called repositories, right? In GitHub, repositories are like containers on GitHub, right? So after downloading GitHub, you should go and create an account, guys. Create an account on GitHub. Also go browse for create account on GitHub, right? If you browse this, if you search for this, you see github.com/join, right? You click on it. This link right here, I also leave it in the description. So you click on it. I'm already logged into my account right here. You click on it, and it will ask for your email, your username, etc, your password. Normal registration process for it's not paid, right? So normal registration process for an online account, right? So you log in right here. So there's something called repositories. What are repositories? Repositories are like containers where you can store your code. I already mentioned that GitHub is like a place where you can push your code into, right? You can push your code into them. Maybe later on you can pull those codes out and look at them and maybe share the link to your repository with other programmers, and they can look at it and maybe work on the same project, right? So right here we have a simple repository right here. I have an example repository right here that I created on my own, right? So my internet is very slow. Right? So this is a very simple, that's if it loads. Bear with me, guys. Bear with me. So this is a very simple repository on GitHub, right? This is also a Django application. This is a very simple repository on GitHub, right? So on our project, let's say you are through with working with your project. Yeah, you are ready with pushing your code to GitHub, right? So first of all, if you come to your project folder, let's say at this point you have downloaded GitHub and you have created an account with GitHub, right? You have downloaded Git to your device and you have created an account with GitHub, right? So if you come to your project folder, open your CLI, right? To make this folder a Git folder, right? A folder that you want Git to manage for you. You say Git init, right? Git init tells tells Git to manage the files in this folder, right? In this your project folder, right? So git init, this is the first command you have to use when you want to use Git on a folder, on your project folder, right? So this is the Django project. I opened it. This is my command line open to the folder. So you say git init, right? Because I already initialized this folder as a Git repository. It's saying reinitializing existing Git repository, right? So after this, next step will be adding your files. Yeah. So after initializing a folder as a repository, right? So the next step will be adding the files, right? Adding these files to that Git, that Git repository. So how do you do that? I say git add, right? So after git add, you have to enter the files, the folders that you want to add, right? So already here we have bookseller, we have media. So you can say bookseller media, right? So but mentioning all of these contents right here, can be tedious, right? So to white cat, if I can say that, white cat, to say okay, add everything in this folder into my Git repository, you use dot, right? So you say git add dot. So this will add all the folders right here to your Git repository. So press enter. So it will add all these files to your Git repository, right? And this will take a little bit of time. We'll look at something called Gitignore files, right? So I have my virtual environment here. That's why it's taking a lot of time, right? So it's taking a lot of time, and let's say it completes, right? So after this, after you have added the files, now the next step is to commit these files. Now you have added, let me say, git init makes your folder a repository. Let me say it opens your container for you. Git add adds your file to that container. Then git commit locks that that container that you created, right? So git commit, right, -m message here. So git commit, this is the command. Git init opens your container, git add adds the file to their container, then git commit closes that file, right? So git commit, to close the file, you have to tell git, you have to write a message that you want to, let's say while closing this file, you want to add a tag to the container to say, in this container I have maybe so content here, I have maybe my books here, I have my pen here, I have this, that, right? So that's what this -m flag is used for, right? So you use it to add a message to this commit, add a message to the container that you are locking, just to add something like a tag on that container, so that anyone that comes to that container will know what is contained in this container, right? So for this right here, we'll just simply say first commit, right? So we'll say first commit, to press enter, right? This saves for you. So let's clear this. It does it in and saves for you. So after doing this, the next thing will be, you go back to your GitHub, you go back to GitHub right here. After that, assuming you have created an account, you go back to GitHub right here. If you come to this top right corner here, you'll see this plus icon. Now you click on this plus icon, you see new repository. You click on new repository. This allows you to create a new repository for another project, right? So you have created this container, you have put your files into this container, you have tagged, you have locked this container and added a tag on it, and told everyone and telling everyone what is on your container, right? So the next thing is to ship your container. That's to carry your container into this platform right here, right? To carry those containers that you have created and place them here, right? So the next thing here will be creating your repository. What's the name of your repository? Let's say Django GitHub, right? Then you add a description right here, any description you want for this repository. This is an awesome repository, if I can spell. So after that, you say public private. Now public private, what does this mean? Now your repository can be public or private. By public, it means that they open that, like everyone on GitHub can see, pull and clone this repository, right? So if you are making maybe a project, maybe a portfolio project, right? So your repository should be public. But let's say maybe you are making a repository that you want to use to deploy, let's say on Heroku. Again, we'll be discussing how to deploy Django projects on Heroku using GitHub, right? So for that instance where you don't want anyone, right? So if your repository is public, it means that anyone can pull those files, make a change to your file and push it back to this repository, right? But for a project that you're working on, a project that maybe you are serving, you are deploying, you don't want that, right? You don't want to give anyone access to pulling your code, changing your codes and pushing it back, right? So but for private, if you make a repository private, you can still invite someone, maybe a fellow developer you're working with, you can still invite them and give them permission to make changes to this repository. So but for now, we leave this repository as public, right? You can add a readme file, and say maybe you say what this, just describe this project, right? So after this, enter your name, enter your description, select whether it's public or private. You can say create repository, right? So this repository is created for you, and you can see here already GitHub is giving you some commands that you can use to get your codes into this repository. You can see it's saying git init, which you have discussed. You can see it's saying git commit, which you have discussed. You can see git branch. You don't have to talk about that. That's not necessary. This is simply a crash course how to get your codes into GitHub. But if you want me to make a broader tutorial on GitHub, how to use GitHub, like broader tutorials on GitHub, leave a comment in the description. If I see maybe 3 people that request for the video on GitHub. I'll probably make a playlist on GitHub, on Git and GitHub, so that you learn how to use it. So let's continue. Then after this is your repository. This is the link to your repository. This link right here is a link to your repository. So you come here and click on this copy icon. So if you go back here to push your code, you say git push, right? You enter the link to your repository and you say master, right? So what's master? That's master. Master is a branch, right? So branches are like different aspects of your repository. Let me explain. Like if, for instance, let's say you want to add a functionality to your software, to your project, right? And like you don't know whether the functionality will work or not, right? So branches are made in such a way that you can create a branch, right? Work on that functionality. After working on that functionality, if it worked, if you like what you have, you can copy the code. If you can say that, you can copy the code from this branch to your main branch, which in this case is the master branch. If you look here in Visual Studio Code, you can see this master right here, right? So you can push this branch into this master branch, right? So after that, after pushing it to the master branch, you can now push the master branch into your repository on GitHub, right? Again, this is simply a crash course, so I'll not really go in depth on this. If you want me to discuss go more in depth on Git and GitHub, just leave a comment in the description and I'll promise to do it. So you say git push, right? You are pushing to the repository, the link to your repository master, which is the branch, right? So after doing this, you press enter. Note, before you do this, you must have indicated this folder as a repository with Git INIT. You must have initialized this repository. After initializing this repository, you must have added your files. After adding your files, you must have committed those files, right? You must have made them a container and given them a tag, right? After giving them a tag, you can now push them to your repository, right? So right now we have pushed to the repository. You can see enumerating objects, counting objects, delta compressing, doing what it has to do. Right now it's saying to your branch link, right? To your branch link, and this is the branch is using, to your repository link, and this is the branch is using, right? So let's go back here and refresh our repository. So if we refresh our repository, hopefully we'll see some files there, right? So already we are seeing it. We are seeing this book folder, book, SLR, media, static, which is what we have here, right? Which is what we have on this, which is what we have here on this folder, right? You can see this book seller, media, static files, and templates. If we go to our repository, you can see it right here, right? So the next thing, let's look at what Gitignore. You can see when we are coming, for instance, right now we have VMV. That's our virtual environment. If you don't know how to use virtual environments, we'll have a tutorial here. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It should be popping out on your screen right now if you are watching on YouTube as a card, right? So this folder, this your virtual environment folder, is not something, for instance, there are files that you don't want to push to your Git repository. Why? Because maybe those files are too big, or maybe those files are not necessary. This virtual environment is not necessary because we have this requirement.txt file, and this requirement.txt file declares the packages that are used in this our Django project, right? So this virtual environment is an example of file that you don't want to push to your Git repository, or maybe you created a file here and maybe named it records.txt, right? Then you are using this file to keep records of things you want to do and things you don't want to do. Maybe you say I have to work on the view files, right? So let's say you are simply using this file to keep records of things you have to do on this project, right? So this file should not be pushed to your Git repository, right? If you're working for maybe a company or you're collaborating with other developers, they don't really want to see this, right? You don't really want them to see this. So this should not be on your Git repository, right? So how do you tell Git not to? Because if you say git add dot, it adds everything here, which you have looked at. Now that's where .gitignore file comes in. Now, how do you create the Gitignore file? You create it by saying dot, right? The name starts with dot. After dot, you say Gitignore, right? You can see Visual Code is bringing out the Git icon right here. So in this Gitignore, you can write out the files you don't want to push to your repository, right? Let's say virtual environment, you don't want to push it, you say slash, right? VMV, right? Then you don't want to also push this records.txt. You say records.txt. So let's try again. So if you can remember, what are the steps you have to take before pushing to a repository? You said you have to say git, right? INIT. We have initialized this folder as a repository, right? So Git is already managing this, so we don't need to say git init anymore because this is already a Git repository. So what we have to say is git add to add. We have created this container with git init, so let's add our files. Let's say git add dot, right? So what does it do? It adds all our file to the repository, right? To the container we've created. Then after creating this, what then do we do? We seal our container and add a tag to it. How do we add a tag to it? Git commit, right? We say git commit, then what is the tag? Let's say second commit, right? So after the second commit, what else? We push to the repository. So how do we push to the repository? We say git push our repository link. Let's go back here. Let's get it. To get it, you simply come here. This is your repository. You go to this code right here, drop it down. You see this HTTP and you copy it, right? So after copying it, you come back, you paste it right here. What is the branch name? Master. If you look here, you see master on Visual Studio Code. You can see master here. You press enter, right? So by doing this, we're expecting our files to be pushed to Git, right? So if we go back, it's pushing. Again, my data is very slow. My internet connection is very slow. So it's pushed, right? So let's go back again. You can see what we have here. What we have here is first commit. So let's reload. You can see this file here, second commit, right? And we have this Gitignore file. And if we open this Gitignore file, you can see we have virtual environment and we have record.txt. And if we go back to our file, you can see we do not have record.txt here, right? And we do not have our VMV file. Now, if maybe you are creating a big project, for instance, you are creating a big project and you don't really know the Gitignore files, maybe you don't know the files you should ignore and ones you should not ignore, you have this gitignore.io. You come here, I'll leave a link to it in the description. Gitignore.io. You can use this for any project. You can use this for React, for Vue, for any project, right? So you enter the type of project you're working on. For us now is Django, right? So you select Django. If maybe you're working on React, you can say React, right? If you are working on React Native, anything, right? So a side note here, guys, very soon we'll be making a playlist on using Django and React. If you know, or maybe you don't know, I'm a React fan guy. I'm a very big fan of React. So very soon we'll be making a playlist on using React and Django. So subscribe, like, turn off the notification, comment, all the good stuff. So we'll add Django right here because we are working with Django, and say create. If you say create here, it produces the Gitignore, the files that should be ignored in every Django project, right? What you simply have to do here is come here, Ctrl A to copy. You copy all of them. Ctrl C to Control C or Command C if you are working with Windows or MacBook. So go to your Gitignore file, you paste this, right? So if you paste this, let me zoom out. So let's see, find VMV, right? So you can see already right here, this platform knows that possibly we are using virtual environment and we are naming it VMV, right? In case you are using Celery, you can see this Celery files that should not be committed, right? So this is really it, guys. This is really okay. Let's talk about remote, right? So you can see that each time we want to push this code right here, if each time we want to push our code to GitHub, we go back to GitHub and we try to copy our repository link, a link to our repository. We'll go to code right here and we'll try to copy this, right? So there is an easier way to do it, and that is remote, right? You can say remotes are like a way to add repository links and name tag them. Let's see how to do that. You say git remote, right? You say git remote add. After saying add, you give it a name. Origin is the name. Then, am I right? I think you have to enter the link first. Let's say cancel this. Let's copy this. Copied. So let's come here, enter the link, and we give the name of this remote. You see why we need the name very soon. Origin. Let's say this is the name of this remote, right? Origin is the name of the remote. This is the link to the Git repository, and remote add. We are saying into our remote list for this repository right here, add this link. So we'll press enter. Oh man, I made a mistake. So it should be git remote add the name of the remote, origin in this case, then the link, right? So the link comes last. My bad, guys. So right now this remote has been added. So if you say git remote -v, you can see the remote files that you have added to this repository. You can see the name here is origin, and this is our repository link. Now, so if you want to push your file, let's clear this. If you want to push your file to your repository, right? So if you want to push your file right now, all you have to do is say git add, right? We have talked about this. Git commit, let's say third commit, right? Now to push your file, you simply say git push origin. Origin is the name of the tag. Remember, origin is the name of the remote. You say origin, which is the name of the remote, master, right? Which is the name of the branch, right? So this origin right here stands for this repository link. So if you click enter right here, it should push. So you can see here it's pushing to our Git repository. And if you come here and reload, and go to Gitignore, you can see our files here, right? So what is next? Let's say, okay, you have maybe someone sent you a link to a Git repository, right? Someone sent you a link to a Git repository, and you want to pull that Git repository and work on it, right? So to do that, let's close this. Let's close this here. Let's close this. Let's open a folder. Let's say in this folder, I have a YouTube folder, always Django. Let's say you want to pull a Django project. You want to pull a Django project, already created Django project on GitHub. Let's say I worked on a Django project and I sent you a link to this Git repository. I was like, hey guy, please help me and work on this. I'm having a mistake here. Maybe I'm not good at Celery, and you are good at Celery, and I'm like, help me and add this functionality with Celery. Be like, okay, what's the Git repository link? I send you this Git repository link right here. So what can you do to get the file, right? So to do that, you go to where you want to create the Django project, right? And you create your folder. Let me name this let's say Django Git, right? So you open your folder right here, you go to your command line, right? So after going to your command line is open here. Let me make this bigger. Let's choose 28. So I hope this is clear enough. Let's choose maybe 36. Okay, right? So you have opened this, you have created the folder where you want this Git project to live, the Git project I sent you, right? So what you have to do is go and get the link of the Git repository. Let's say this is it and I sent it to you. You copy this, right? So to push the Git repository on our local device, what do we say? We say git push. Guess what? To pull it, what do we say? We say git pull, right? So we say git pull this, right? Then we give the branch, the name of the branch that we want to pull, master, right? So how do you know the name of the branch you want to pull? If you go back to your repository, you can see right here, you have the branches. You have this master branch, right? Because it's the only branch we have here. So this is the branch we want to pull. So you go back, you say git pull the repository link, the repository branch. You press enter. Sorry guys, you have to git init. You have to make this folder a git container. So if you make it a git container, let's clear. There you say git pull the link of the repository, the branch you want to pull, right? You can see it's pulling it, unpacking objects, compressing objects, unpacking objects. Let's go to our folder. It's empty right now. Let's see what happens when it's through with this process. This folder is empty now, right? You can see it's still running, right? So this folder, this is the project file. You have successfully pulled this project you have successfully put this Git repository into your folder, right? So you can go to cmd, you can say code dot, right? So you can say code dot open this folder in your favorite code editor. For me is Visual Studio Code. Favorite code editor, these are your files and you can start working on them. You can start adding the functionality I pleaded with you to help me add, right? So this is it for me guys today. I hope this was helpful. Again, I thought it wise to make this tutorial because we'll be looking at how to deploy Django projects to Heroku using GitHub, right? So it's only right I discuss a bit about GitHub and using GitHub so that it will be easier for us to follow in that tutorial, right? So this is it for me. Take care of yourself. Have a nice day. Peace.